A pale sword gleaming in the dawn light, a white cloak soaked in blood. 3 knights standing before a tower in the Red Mountains, 7 men riding toward them, knowing most will not return. The finest knight I ever saw. Barristan Selmy would later say, his voice heavy with memory. Arthur Dayne, the sword of the morning. He would have killed me, but for Howland Reed. A man so skilled with a blade that even his enemies spoke his name with reverence. A warrior so honorable he let a mad outlaw take a fresh sword mid-duel before killing him. A knight so loyal he died protecting a secret that would change the fate of Westeros forever. But here is what haunts the history books. Here is what keeps Meisters awake in their towers, scrolling through ancient texts by candlelight. Arthur Dayne was the greatest swordsman in the history of the 7 Kingdoms, yet he spent his final year guarding a remote tower in Dorne while the realm burned. He could have been at the Trident. He could have saved Prince Rhaegar. He could have changed everything. Instead, he chose to stand vigil over something else. Something Rhaegar believed was more important than winning a war. 3 of the greatest knights in Westeros, waiting at a tower for a confrontation they knew would kill them. What secret was worth dying for? What oath binds a man so completely that he faces 7 warriors alone, knowing the war is already lost, knowing his king is dead, knowing he will not survive the morning? The answer lies buried beneath 8 cairns of stones in the Dornish mountains. It echoes in the words Ned Stark never spoke. It gleams in the pale blade called Dawn, forged from a fallen star, now waiting in Starfall for another worthy hand. This is the story of Sir Arthur Dayne, from the ancient halls of Starfall to the blood-soaked sands at the Tower of Joy. From knighting a young Jaime Lannister on a battlefield to facing Ned Stark in his final dawn. From serving a mad king to dying for a hidden prince. Tonight we uncover the complete truth about the Sword of the Morning, the duels, the oaths, the impossible choices. The moment everything changed at Harrenhal, the legendary fight against the Smiling Knight. The 3 Kingsguard who stayed behind while Rhaegar rode to his death, and the final battle that only 2 men survived to speak of, though one never told the full truth. Hey everyone! Before we begin this journey into one of the most tragic and honorable lives in Westerosi history, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy deep dives into the legends of Game of Thrones. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. It is always amazing to see who is joining from around the world. Now settle in, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow, dim the lights, if you can, and let us step back into the age of knights and dragons, oaths and secrets, where the greatest swordsman in history made choices that would echo through generations. This is the entire story of Sir Arthur Dayne. In the southwestern corner of Dorne, where the river Torrentine meets the summer sea, stands Starfall, a castle of pale stone on an island, ancient beyond reckoning, home to House Dayne, one of the oldest bloodlines in Westeros. They were here before the Andals came, before the dragons crossed the narrow sea, before the 7 kingdoms were 7 kingdoms. The Danes claim descent from the first men, yet their features tell a different story. Violet eyes that mirror the Valyrians, though no dragon blood flows in their veins. A mystery the maesters debate in their dusty halls, but House Dayne's true legend is not their ancestry, it is the sword. Millennia ago, in the age before history became written word, a star fell from the sky. The people of Starfall watched it streak across the darkness, leaving a trail of light and crash into the nearby mountains. The first Dayne followed its path, found where it struck the earth, and there, cooling in the crater, was a stone unlike anything in Westeros, white as milk, warm to the touch, metal from the heavens. The Danes took this gift from the sky and forged it into a blade. They called it Dawn, a great sword pale as morning light, alive with an inner glow, sharper than castle-forged steel, as deadly as Valyrian steel though it came from the stars instead of the fires of old Valyria. But Dawn was never a simple inheritance, passing from father to son like other ancestral swords. No, the Danes decreed that only a knight of House Dayne proven worthy through skill and honor could wield it. The sword would sit in Starfall, sometimes for generations, waiting, and the knight who earned the right to carry Dawn would bear the title Sword of the Morning. Centuries passed. Some eras had a Sword of the Morning, others did not. The blade waited, patient as stone, for the next worthy hand. Arthur Dayne was born around the year 260 by the reckoning of Meisters, second son of House Dayne, which meant Starfall would pass to his older brother. But Arthur was not meant to rule a castle. Even as a boy, it was clear what he was meant for. His hands knew swords the way other children knew toys. He grew up in the shadow of Dawn, the pale blade resting in the great hall, watching, waiting. Every young Dane dreamed of being worthy. Most never were. Arthur looked at that sword and felt something deeper than ambition. He felt calling. The Dornish train their warriors differently than the North, where Northmen favor strength and heavy armor. Dornish fighters learn speed, precision, adaptability. Arthur absorbed these lessons like sand absorbs water. By his teenage years, he was defeating knights twice his age in the practice yard. He had a sister, Ashara, who would later become known as one of the great beauties of Westeros. Another sister, Illyria, younger still. A family proud and ancient, but not wealthy in the way of Lannisters or powerful like Starks. Their treasure was history. Their wealth was honor. When Arthur came of age, he left Starfall to prove himself in the wider world. The tournament circuits of Westeros became his training ground. Lannisport, Storm's End, White Harbor. He competed against the finest knights in the Seven Kingdoms, and he won, again and again. His fighting style mesmerized those who watched. No wasted movement, every strike purposeful. He made swordsmanship look like art, like dancing, like water flowing downhill. Inevitable, beautiful, deadly. By his mid-teens, Arthur returned to Starfall. The elders of House Dayne convened. They had watched his rise, heard the reports, seen his character, and they judged him worthy. Arthur Dayne took Dawn from its place in the hall. The moment his hand closed around the hilt, something clicked into place. The sword seemed made for him, or he for it. The distinction did not matter. He became the Sword of the Morning, a title he would carry for the rest of his too short life. The pale blade across his back, he rode north toward King's Landing, toward the Kingsguard, toward destiny, toward glory and tragedy, in equal measure. Arthur Dayne did not simply become great. He built himself into legend, one tournament at a time, one opponent at a time, one choice at a time. The early 270s saw him traveling across Westeros with Dawn strapped across his back. That alone turned heads. A great sword pale as bone, gleaming like moonlight on water. People whispered when he passed, "Is that Dawn? Is he truly the Sword of the Morning?" He let his blade answer. The tournament at Lannisport in 276 drew every ambitious knight in the realm. Lord Tywin Lannister had organized it to celebrate the birth of Prince Viserys Targaryen. Gold flowed like wine. The finest fighters competed for glory and coin. Arthur entered as an unknown Dornishman with a strange white sword. He left as a legend. One by one, the champions fell. Experienced knights who had fought in actual wars found themselves disarmed, unhorsed, defeated by this young man from Starfall. His technique baffled them. He moved like quicksilver, anticipated attacks before opponents committed to them, made impossible parries look effortless. In the final tilt, Arthur faced Prince Rhaegar Targaryen himself, The crown prince, already skilled beyond his years, rode with the confidence of dragons in his blood. They shattered 3 lances against each other. The crowd held its breath. On the 4th pass, Arthur's lance struck true. Rhaegar tumbled from his horse. The Dornishman had defeated the dragon prince. Rhaegar rose, removed his helm, and crossed the field on foot. He extended his hand to Arthur. A friendship was born in that moment that would last until the trident swallowed one of them forever. At Storm's End, another grand tournament tested Arthur again. He and Rhaegar faced each other multiple times that season. They broke 12 lances in one joust, neither gaining clear advantage. Their matches became the stuff of songs. Eventually Rhaegar prevailed, but barely. The prince knew he had found his equal. More than equal in some ways, because while Rhaegar possessed the blood of the dragon and the crown prince's natural authority, Arthur had something purer. He embodied every knightly ideal without arrogance or self-awareness. He was courteous to defeated opponents, humble in victory, generous with younger knights seeking advice. When he won, which was often, he never boasted. When he lost, which was rare, he congratulated his better without excuse or complaint. This was not an act. This was simply who Arthur Dayne was. The Meisters who chronicled tournaments began noting something unusual. Knights who lost to Arthur did not resent him. They respected him. Some became friends. In a world where pride governed most warriors, Arthur stood apart. He fought for honor itself, not glory or gold. Dawn became famous alongside its wielder. The great sword that could cut through regular steel like parchment. The blade that never dulled or chipped. Arthur wore it across his back in a white leather scabbard, and when he drew it, spectators gasped. Even in sunlight it seemed to glow, as if remembering its birth in starfire. Opponents feared that sword, not just for its edge, but for the arm that wielded it. Arthur could swing Dawn with precision that should have been impossible for a blade that size. 2-handed sweeps that flowed into one-handed parries, overhead strikes that transitioned into horizontal cuts mid-swing. He made the great sword an extension of his body. Fighting styles across Westeros varied wildly. Northern knights favored strength and endurance, outlasting opponents through sheer resilience. Knights from the Reach emphasized pageantry and classical technique. The Stormlands bred aggressive fighters. But Arthur synthesized everything. He studied each style, absorbed its strengths, discarded its weaknesses. From Dawn he kept speed and adaptability. From the North he learned patience. From the Reach he took refinement. The result was something new. A perfect synthesis. The complete warrior. Sir Barristan Selmy watched Arthur rise during these years. Barristan, already legendary as the Bold, recognized something extraordinary. They competed against each other several times, became friends despite the rivalry. Years later, Barristan would admit that he and Arthur were evenly matched with regular swords, but give Arthur Dawn, and the Sword of the Morning would win every time. This was not arrogance from Barristan, it was truth. He had fought enough battles to recognize when someone surpassed him. By his late teens, Arthur Dayne was the most talked about knight in Westeros. Songs spread his name from dawn to the wall, the Sword of the Morning, who fights like water flows, the knight with the star sword who never breaks his word, the Dornishman who embodies honor itself. Lords began suggesting him for the King's Guard, that sacred order of 7 knights sworn to protect the king, taking no wife, holding no lands, fathering no children. The ultimate sacrifice for the ultimate honor. Many knights refused when asked, unwilling to give up family and legacy. Arthur Dayne would not refuse. He believed in something larger than himself. The realm needed protecting. Kings needed loyal swords. If he could serve that purpose, if his skill could shield the innocent and uphold justice, then what greater calling existed? News reached him in dawn during 276 or early 277. King Ares II Targaryen sought a new member for his Kingsguard. Arthur's reputation had reached the Iron Throne. The Mad King, not yet completely mad, recognized quality when he saw it. The summons came. Arthur stood in Starfall's great hall, dawn across his back, and made his choice. His older brother would continue the Dayne line. Ashara and Illyria would marry and have families of their own. But Arthur belonged to something else. Now, he rode north toward King's Landing, toward a white cloak that would define him, toward oaths that would trap him, toward serving a king who would descend into madness while Arthur stood helpless, bound by vows he would never break. The greatest swordsman in Westeros was about to become the finest knight in the realm, and that distinction, that commitment to honor above all else, would eventually destroy him. But in that moment, riding north with dawn gleaming in sunlight, Arthur Dayne believed he was riding toward glory. He could not yet see the tragedy waiting at the end of the road. None of us ever can. The Kingsguard, 7 knights in white armor, sworn to protect the king and royal family until death. No wives, no children, no lands or titles. Everything surrendered for one purpose: to stand between the throne and those who would threaten it. Arthur Dayne knelt before King Ares II Targaryen in the throne room of the Red Keep. Around him stood the existing members of the Kingsguard, white cloaks draped over their shoulders. Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the Order. Sir Barristan Selmy, Barristan the Bold, Prince Lewin Martell, a fellow Dornishman. Sir Oswell Went, Sir Jonathor Darry. These were legends, and Arthur was joining them. The oath left no room for interpretation. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. Arthur spoke the words without hesitation, meant every syllable. When Ares placed the white cloak across his shoulders, Arthur felt its weight, not physical weight. The weight of absolute commitment. Everything he had been was gone. He was Kingsguard now. Only that, forever. He surrendered his claim to Starfall, though as a second son he had little claim anyway. He would never marry, never father children to carry the Dayne name. Dawn would remain his, but only in service to the crown. His life belonged to the realm. Most men would have felt the sacrifice. Arthur felt only purpose. The Kingsguard became his new family. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, gruff and direct, commanded with the authority of decades. The White Bull had served since before Arthur was born. Under his leadership, the Order maintained its standards. He tolerated no weakness, accepted no excuses, but he was fair. He respected Arthur immediately, recognizing in the young Dornishman the same dedication that had driven Gerald himself. Barristan Selmy, only a few years older than Arthur, had already earned his place in songs. Barristan the Bold, they called him. He had saved King Aerys during the defiance of Duskendale, cutting through dozens of enemies to rescue his captive king. That rescue had consequences neither Barristan nor anyone else could have predicted. The experience broke something in Aerys, turned his paranoia into madness. But that madness grew slowly. In Arthur's early days, Aerys still had moments of lucidity, moments where he seemed almost reasonable. Almost. Prince Lewin Martell took Arthur under his wing. Another Dornishman in the White Brotherhood created natural kinship. Lewin had served for years, understood the realities of Kingsguard life. He taught Arthur what no oath could explain: how to stand for hours without moving, how to remain alert during endless council meetings, how to watch everything while appearing to watch nothing. More importantly, Lewin taught Arthur about the weight they all carried. You will see things you cannot prevent, Lewin told him during a quiet moment. You will stand while the king does terrible things. Your oath binds you to obey. This is the price of the white cloak. Arthur did not fully understand. Not yet. His assignment placed him primarily with Prince Rhaegar. The Crown Prince and the Sword of the Morning had become friends during tournaments. Now Arthur served as Rhaegar's shadow. Where the prince went, Arthur followed. They spent countless hours together, training in the yard, reading in the library, traveling to various castles across the realm. Rhaegar was nothing like his father. Thoughtful where Aerys was impulsive, melancholic where Aerys raged, obsessed with prophecy and ancient texts about heroes reborn. He played his harp beautifully, composing songs that made even hard men weep. But beneath the music and poetry lived a deep sadness. "My father is mad," Rhaegar confided one night. Arthur said nothing. What could he say? "It grows worse each year. I see it happening, and I am powerless to stop it." Arthur understood powerlessness. He felt it every time Aerys ordered someone burned alive for imagined slights. Every time the king screamed about traitors in his midst. Every time innocent men died because paranoia demanded blood. The King's Guard stood witness to it all. Sir Jonathan Darry beside the Iron Throne, face blank as stone. Sir Joniswell went outside the royal chambers, hearing screams within. Barristan Selmy escorting prisoners to their deaths, unable to speak in their defense. And Arthur standing behind Rhaegar during small council meetings, watching Aerys deteriorate. The king's madness manifested in fire. Aerys became obsessed with wildfire, that volatile green substance created by the pyromancers. He demanded they produce more, store it throughout King's Landing. He spoke dreamily of burning away all his enemies, of purifying the realm in flame. Arthur exchanged glances with his white brothers during these speeches. They all understood what was happening. They served a monster, but the oath held. The king's word was law. Disobey, and you broke your vow. Breaking that vow meant dishonor, worse than death. So they stood, and they watched, and they hated themselves for it. Rhaegar became Arthur's anchor. The prince represented everything good about House Targaryen, everything worth protecting. When Arthur felt the weight of his white cloak crushing him, when he wondered what honor meant if honor required standing silent while atrocities occurred, he looked at Rhaegar. "This is why we endure," Arthur told himself, "to protect the good from the rot, to ensure that when Aerys dies, Rhaegar can rebuild what his father destroyed." The plan seemed sound. Aerys was aging. Rhaegar was young. Time favored patience. But time, as it turned out, had other plans. Years passed. In this uneasy balance, Arthur became one of the most respected Kingsguard in memory. His skill was unquestioned, his honor beyond reproach. When he stood beside the king, people felt safer. When he accompanied Rhaegar, the prince moved through crowds without fear. The greatest swordsman in Westeros had become the finest knight in the realm. Everything he had dreamed of achieving, everything except peace with what he saw every day. Because the white cloak that marked him as noble also bound him to serve evil. And Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, perfect knight of every song and story, was learning that sometimes honor demands the impossible. Sometimes being good requires being complicit with bad. That lesson would follow him to a tower in Dawn, to a final battle against 7 men, to his death in service of an oath that few would understand. But first, there was a forest full of outlaws, and a mad knight who wanted Dawn for himself. South of King's Landing stretched the Kingswood, a vast forest of ancient oaks and hidden paths. For centuries, it had been royal hunting grounds, a place where kings chased deer and nobles enjoyed the sport of the hunt. Then it became something else, a haven for outlaws. The Kingswood Brotherhood emerged in the late 270s. Not simple bandits stealing from travelers. These were organized, led by a former nobleman named Simon Toyne. They kidnapped lords for ransom, ambushed noble escorts on the King's Road, grew so bold they attacked Princess Elia Martell's party as she traveled through the forest. During that attack, an outlaw archer named Olmer put an arrow clean through Lord Commander Gerald Hightower's hand, shot the white bull, and lived to boast about it. Stole a kiss from Princess Elia before vanishing back into the trees. The Brotherhood understood something crucial. The small folk protected them. Forest peasants who had been ignored by lords for generations saw the outlaws as heroes. The Brotherhood shared their stolen gold, defended villagers from abusive tax collectors, became legends among the common people. Previous attempts to root them out failed because every time royal forces entered the Kingswood, the small folk warned the outlaws. The Brotherhood would melt into the forest, impossible to find, then emerge somewhere else to strike again. They even killed Sir Victor Tyrell, cousin to Lord Mace Tyrell of Highgarden. The realm's patience ran out. King Aerys, paranoid and furious, demanded action. Immediate, decisive action. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower's wounded hand made him unfit to lead a military campaign, so the mission fell to the next most qualified Kingsguard, Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. Arthur assembled his force carefully. Sir Barristan Selmy, whose skill matched Arthur's own, Lord Sumner Craighall, a seasoned commander, a detachment of soldiers and knights, and Craighall's squire, a boy of 15, with golden hair and green eyes, Jaime Lannister, son of Tywin, already showing the arrogance that would define him. Young Jaime worshipped Arthur, watched him constantly, studied his movements, dreamed of becoming the Sword of the Morning reborn. Arthur treated the boy with patient kindness, answering questions, offering advice, never dismissing his enthusiasm. They rode for the Kingswood, knowing they faced something unprecedented. The Brotherhood numbered perhaps 20 men, but they included some of the deadliest fighters in Westeros. Simon Toyne himself was formidable. Winder the White Fawn, Big Belly Ben, Ulmer, whose arrows never missed. Fletcher Dick, considered one of the greatest archers who ever lived. And then there was the Smiling Knight. Jaime Lannister would later describe him as the mountain of my boyhood. Half Gregor Clegane's size but twice as mad. The Smiling Knight killed for pleasure, wore a permanent grin that had nothing to do with joy. He was broken inside, completely insane but absolutely lethal with a sword. Arthur and his forces entered the Kingswood, expecting resistance. They found silence. Empty villages, closed doors, suspicious eyes watching from windows. The small folk refused to speak, would not say where the Brotherhood hid. The same problem that had stymied every previous expedition. But Arthur Dayne did not respond with threats or violence. He did something radical. He listened. In the small villages, he sat with the elders, asked about their grievances, learned that nobles took their food without payment, that they had no rights to hunt in their own forest, that tax collectors abused them, and no one cared. Arthur paid for everything his forces took. Fair prices, in coin. He petitioned King Aerys directly for reforms, expanded grazing rights, won the villagers' permission to fell a certain number of trees each year, secured hunting rights for a portion of the king's deer during autumn. If you want their help, he told young Jaime, you need to make them love you. The Brotherhood defended the small folk because no one else would. Show them we can do more than the outlaws ever could. Slowly the villagers opened to them. Information began to flow. The Brotherhood's hiding places became known. Their supply routes exposed. Without the forest people's protection, the outlaws became vulnerable. The final confrontation came deep in the Kingswood. The Brotherhood had nowhere left to run. They chose to fight. Sir Barristan Selmy engaged Simon Toyne directly. The two master swordsmen circled each other between ancient trees. Toyne was skilled, dangerous, fighting for his life. Barristan was better. Their blades met again and again until Barristan's found Toyne's heart. The Brotherhood's leader fell among the roots, and with him fell the outlaw's coordination. Young Dayne found himself facing big-bellied Ben, a massive outlaw twice his size. The boy held his ground, defended his lord with frantic courage, saved Sumner Craycall's life by getting between Ben and his master. He did not kill the outlaw. Ben escaped into the chaos, but Dayne proved himself brave. Then the smiling night came for Dayne. The mad outlaw had been cutting through soldiers, laughing as he fought. He saw the golden-haired boy and grinned wider. Here was sport. Here was someone young to torment. He advanced on Dayne, sword dripping red. Dayne held him briefly, desperately. The smiling knight toyed with him, enjoying the fear in the boy's eyes. One more moment, and Dayne would have died. Arthur Dayne stepped between them. Dawn came off Arthur's back in one smooth motion. The pale blade caught sunlight filtering through leaves. The smiling knight's grin became eager. This was what he wanted. A real opponent, a legend to test himself against. They fought among the oaks, while the battle raged around them. The smiling knight was genuinely skilled, not just mad. His blade met Dawn with ringing impacts that echoed through the forest. He bled from a dozen small cuts but kept pressing forward, kept attacking, laughing between breaths. Then his sword broke. A notch became a crack, became a complete failure of the blade. Castle-forged steel could not match the metal of a fallen star. The smiling knight's weapon shattered against Dawn. Arthur lowered his sword, stepped back, allowed the outlaw to retrieve a fresh blade from a fallen soldier. The smiling knight chose his new sword, tested its weight, then looked at Arthur with something like respect. "It is that white sword of yours I want," he said. "Dawn, give me that, and we can have a proper fight." Arthur Dayne leveled the pale blade at the madman. "Then you shall have it, sir." They resumed. This time Arthur did not hold back. Dawn moved in arcs of light. The great sword swept through the smiling knight's defenses, found his chest, drove through ribs and heart, and out his back. The smiling knight's grin finally faded. He fell, and the last real threat from the Brotherhood died with him. The Kingswood campaign ended with the outlaws destroyed or scattered. Ulmer would later take the Black and join the Night's Watch rather than face execution. The others died in the forest or fled Westeros entirely. That night, Arthur Dayne knighted Jaime Lannister on the battlefield. The boy stood vigil in a small sept while Arthur kept watch. At dawn, Arthur touched Dawn to Jaime's shoulders. "Rise, Sir Jaime, a knight of the realm." Jaime wept. The boy who wanted to be Arthur Dayne had received knighthood from Arthur Dayne himself. It was the pinnacle of his young life, the moment everything seemed possible. Arthur saw something else in Jaime's tears. He saw himself years ago, a young man who believed in honor and glory, who thought the white cloak meant protecting the good and defeating the bad. He wondered how long it would take Jaime to learn the truth, that sometimes honor requires standing silent, that the white cloak can become a chain, that the greatest knights often serve the worst kings. The Kingswood Brotherhood was destroyed. Arthur Dayne's legend grew even larger. Songs spread about the Sword of the Morning, who showed mercy to a mad outlaw, then killed him with the sword he desired. But Arthur felt no triumph, only exhaustion, only the knowledge that he would return to King's Landing and resume standing beside a mad king while pretending everything was fine. The greatest victory of his career, and it felt hollow. 3 years later, At a tournament in Harrenhal, the realm would begin to burn, and Arthur Dayne would watch it happen, bound by oaths he could not break, serving a prince who would make choices that doomed them all. The year 281 brought a false spring to Westeros. Winter's grip loosened unexpectedly. Flowers bloomed months early. The weather warmed enough that people spoke of hope, of change, of better times ahead. They called it the year of the false spring because it did not last. Neither did the hope. Lord Walter Went announced a tournament at Harrenhal, that massive ruined castle in the Riverlands. The prize purse was staggering, 40,000 gold dragons, more wealth than most lords saw in a lifetime. Knights from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms began traveling to the God's Eye Lake. But the tournament was never really about celebration. Whispers suggested something deeper. A cover for a great council, secret meetings among lords to discuss King Aerys and his madness, perhaps even to set aside the Mad King in favor of Prince Rhaegar. If such plans existed, they died when Aerys himself announced he would attend. The paranoid king, who rarely left the Red Keep anymore, suddenly decided to make the journey north. His presence guaranteed that any plotting would remain whispered, not acted upon. The king's guard accompanied their king. Arthur rode beside Prince Rhaegar, watching the realm gather. House Stark arrived in force. Lord Rickard with his sons Brandon and Eddard, his daughter Lyanna, his youngest Benjen, Robert Baratheon came, already betrothed to Lyanna, already possessive of her. Lord Tywin Lannister brought his golden twins, Cersei and Jaime. Every great house sent representatives. Arthur competed in the lists, defeated opponent after opponent with dawn gleaming across his back. But this tournament belonged to Rhaegar. The prince moved through the competition like destiny itself, his black armor decorated with rubies that caught the light. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen emblazoned on his chest. In the final tilt, Arthur and Rhaegar faced each other once more, friends competing for the crown. They had done this dance before at other tournaments, knew each other's techniques intimately. 3 lances splintered between them before Rhaegar's aim proved truer. Arthur went down. The crowd roared. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen stood as champion of Harrenhal. But something else happened at that tournament, something that would matter more than any joust. A mystery knight appeared during the competitions, short of stature, shield painted with a weirwood tree, its face appearing to laugh. The Knight of the Laughing Tree, people called this stranger. The mystery knight defeated 3 men in succession, not killed, simply unhorsed and humiliated, demanded they teach their squires honor and chivalry, then vanished before anyone could unmask them. King Aerys grew paranoid immediately. Who was this mystery knight? A threat? An assassin? He commanded his king's guard to find this person, bring them before the throne. Rhaegar volunteered to lead the search himself, rode out with a small party. When he returned, Rhaegar reported the mystery knight had escaped, could not be found. Aerys raged, but there was nothing to be done. Years later, the truth became clear to those who looked carefully. Lyanna Stark, fierce and willful, had likely been the mystery knight, defending Howland Reed from the squires who had bullied him. Her father and brothers did not know. Robert Baratheon certainly did not know. But Rhaegar had found her, had discovered her secret, and kept it. What passed between them in that moment? No one can say for certain, but something changed. The tournament's final ceremony brought thousands together to see Rhaegar crowned victor. Tradition dictated he would receive a crown of winter roses to place on his queen of love and beauty. Everyone expected him to crown his wife, Princess Elia Martell of Dorne. She sat in the high seats, their infant son Aegon in her arms, waiting for her husband to honor her. Rhaegar took the crown of blue winter roses, rode his horse slowly past the high seats. past his wife, past his son, past his family. He stopped before Lyanna Stark. The silence that fell over Harrenhal was complete, absolute, thousands of people holding their breath as one. Arthur watched from his place among the Kingsguard and felt history pivoting on this single moment. Rhaegar placed the crown in Lyanna's lap, named her his Queen of Love and Beauty, named another man's betrothed, named a Stark girl instead of his Martell wife. The crowd erupted, not in celebration, in shock, confusion, outrage. Robert Baratheon's face turned purple with fury. Brandon Stark looked ready to challenge the prince then and there. Eddard Stark stared in disbelief. Princess Elia's expression remained carefully neutral, but the insult was impossible to miss. Arthur saw Lyanna's face. She was not smiling. She looked almost frightened. A 15-year-old girl suddenly at the center of a scandal she did not fully understand. What was Rhaegar thinking? Arthur would ask himself that question 1,000 times over the coming years. Did the prince believe his prophecies so completely that he thought public opinion did not matter? Did he truly love Lyanna even then? Or was this some calculated political move that Arthur could not decipher? Whatever the reason, the damage was done. The realm watched their crown prince dishonor his wife publicly, watched him show favor to a girl promised to another man, watched the beginning of something that would burn the 7 kingdoms. Arthur remained beside Rhaegar as they left Harrenhal days later. The prince said nothing about his choice, offered no explanation. Arthur could not ask, could not counsel against what was already finished. But he knew, with the certainty of a man who has lived through battles and seen how small moments become catastrophes, that something terrible had begun at Harrenhal. The false spring ended. Winter returned harder than before, and within months, Lyanna Stark would disappear, and the realm would go to war. Arthur Dayne would spend what remained of his life dealing with the consequences of a crown of blue roses placed in the wrong lap. Months passed after Harrenhal. The realm tried to return to normal, but normal was already dying. Whispers spread through King's Landing, like smoke through a burning building. Something was wrong. Everyone felt it. No one could name it. Then Lyanna Stark vanished. The official story spread quickly. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen had kidnapped the Stark girl, taken her by force, was holding her somewhere, against her will, raping her. The details grew more horrific with each telling. The truth, Arthur knew, was more complex. He did not know everything. Rhaegar kept his plans close, but Arthur had eyes. He had watched his prince at Harrenhal, had seen how Rhaegar looked at Lyanna, had noticed Lyanna's own conflicted expression. This was not simple kidnapping. This was something Rhaegar believed necessary for reasons Arthur could not fully grasp. The prince spoke endlessly of prophecy, of the prince that was promised, of a song of ice and fire. Princess Elia could bear no more children after their son Aegon's difficult birth. The maesters were certain, yet Rhaegar believed he needed a 3rd child, that the prophecy demanded it. Arthur was not privy to whatever arrangement existed between Rhaegar and Lyanna. Whether she went willingly or not, history would debate forever, but he suspected the truth lived somewhere between the two extremes. Not kidnapping, not simple love either, something stranger, something driven by Rhaegar's obsession with destiny. None of that mattered to Brandon Stark. Lyanna's older brother, hot-blooded and fierce, heard his sister was taken. He did not wait for more information, did not send ravens requesting explanations. He rode straight for King's Landing with several companions. Arthur was present when Brandon arrived at the Red Keep's gates. The young Stark was shouting before he dismounted. "Come out and die, Rhaegar. Face me, you bastard." Demanding the prince face him in combat, accusing Rhaegar of crimes in front of the entire court. It was foolish, suicidal. But Brandon Stark was 20 and in love with his own righteousness. He thought he was defending his sister's honor. He was signing his death warrant. King Aerys had Brandon arrested immediately, charged him and his companions with threatening the crown prince, sent word to their fathers, demanded they come to King's Landing to answer for their son's crimes. Lord Rickard Stark, Brandon's father and Warden of the North, made the journey south. He demanded trial by combat, as was his right, a father defending his son through the ancient laws of Westeros. Aerys smiled, granted the request, then named fire as his champion. Arthur stood in the throne room and watched them prepare Lord Rickard Stark, watched them suspend him from the rafters in his armor, watched them build the fire beneath him, watched Brandon placed in a strangulation device just out of reach of a sword, close enough that if he struggled toward it, he would strangle himself trying to reach the weapon. The king's mad logic was perfect. The father would burn, the son would strangle himself trying to save his father. Both would die because they dared challenge a Targaryen. Arthur wanted to scream, wanted to draw dawn and cut through everyone in the room. End this madness. These were innocent men. This was murder dressed as justice. This was everything wrong with Aerys distilled into one horrible moment. But his oath held him silent, held him still. He was Kingsguard. The king's word was law. To act against Aerys was to break every vow Arthur had taken, to become an oath-breaker, to stain the white cloak he had worn with such pride. So he stood, and he watched, and he hated himself. Lord Rickard Stark cooked alive inside his armor, screaming. Brandon strangled himself, reaching for the sword that might save his father. Both died in agony, while King Aerys laughed. The other Kingsguard stood witness too. Barristan Selmy with his face carved from stone, Jonathan Darry staring straight ahead, young Jaime Lannister, newest member of the Order, looking sick, all of them trapped by the same oaths, all of them complicit in atrocity. Aerys was not finished. He sent commands to Jon Arryn, Lord of the Vale, demanding the heads of Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, demanding more blood for imagined crimes. Jon Arryn refused, called his banners instead, raised his sword against the Iron Throne. Robert's rebellion began. The realm split down the middle, North Vale, Stormlands and Riverlands against the crown. The Reach stayed loyal under Mace Tyrell. Dorne joined reluctantly, their princess married to Rhaegar, giving them no choice. The Westerlands under Tywin Lannister remained neutral, watching, waiting to see who would win before committing. The Kingsguard divided according to need. Barristan rode out to lead armies. Jonathan Darry remained in King's Landing. Jaime stayed at Aerys' side, the king trusting Tywin's son to keep Tywin loyal. Prince Lewin Martell would eventually join Rhaegar's army when the prince took the field. Arthur stayed with Rhaegar, but Rhaegar was not in King's Landing. The prince had disappeared months ago with Lyanna Stark, vanished to somewhere in Dorne. Arthur received orders to join him there. The journey south took him through a realm at war with itself. Battles erupted across the Riverlands. Robert Baratheon won at Summerhall in a single day of stunning victories, lost at Ashford when the Tyrells crushed his forces, escaped at Stony Sept when Jon Connington nearly caught him, only for Eddard Stark to arrive with reinforcements at the critical moment. Arthur finally reached Dorne and found Rhaegar at a remote tower in the Red Mountains. The Tower of Joy, they called it, a small keep far from any major settlement, and inside was Lyanna Stark, heavy with child. Everything became clear to Arthur in that moment. The prophecy, the third child, the reason Rhaegar had risked everything. The prince believed this baby would be the prince that was promised, the one who would save the realm from the darkness Rhaegar read about in dusty prophecies. Rhaegar looked at Arthur with desperate hope. I need you to protect them. When I ride north to face Robert, I need you here. You and Gerald and Oswell, 3 King's Guard to keep them safe. Arthur wanted to argue, wanted to insist his place was at Rhaegar's side. The finest swordsman in Westeros should stand with his prince against the rebel army. He could make a difference. He could change the outcome. But Rhaegar would not be moved. This matters more than my life, more than the war, more than the throne. Promise me, Arthur, promise me, you will guard them. So Arthur promised, made another oath he would keep unto death. Watched Rhaegar ride north with Prince Lewin Martell and 40,000 men. Watched his closest friend leave for a battle Arthur would not fight in. Lord Commander Gerald Hightower and Sir Oswell went arrived days later. 3 Kingsguard settling in to guard a tower that held a Stark girl and an unborn child, waiting while the realm burned, while battles raged, while everything they had sworn to protect crumbled. News filtered south slowly. The Battle of the Trident. Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen meeting in the river, hammer against sword. Robert's blow crushing Rhaegar's chest, rubies from the prince's armor scattering in the water like drops of blood. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen died at the Trident. Prince Lewin Martell fell in the same battle. 2 men Arthur loved, gone. The war effectively over with Rhaegar's death. Then worse news, the sack of King's Landing. Tywin Lannister arriving with his army, claiming loyalty, then turning his men loose on the city. Princess Elia raped and murdered, her children butchered. King Aerys killed by Jaime Lannister, the youngest Kingsguard, who broke his oath to end the Mad King's life. The world Arthur had known ceased to exist. His king was dead. His prince was dead. The royal family was dead. Robert Baratheon sat the Iron Throne. Inside the Tower of Joy, Lyanna gave birth to a son, a baby boy with Stark and Targaryen blood. The prince that was promised, if Rhaegar's prophecies held any truth. And outside the tower, Arthur Dayne prepared to die protecting him, because he had promised. Because the oath mattered more than his life. Because even in a world gone mad, some men kept their word. The war was over. Robert Baratheon wore the crown. The Targaryens were dead or fled across the narrow sea. The realm began the slow work of healing, of counting the dead, of learning to live with what they had done to each other. But Eddard Stark could not rest. His sister was still missing. Lyanna had not been found in King's Landing, was not among the refugees streaming from the capital. No one knew where Rhaegar had taken her. No one could say if she still lived. Tented searched, sent riders in every direction, questioned prisoners, followed every rumor and whisper. Most trails led nowhere. Dead ends and false information. Months of hunting ghosts. Then someone mentioned a tower in Dorne, remote, guarded. 3 King's Guards stationed there for reasons no one understood.
Why would elite knights be wasting their time at an abandoned tower when their king was dead and the war was lost?
Unless they were protecting something, someone. Ned gathered 6 men he trusted. Lord Howland Reed, his closest friend, the small Cranagman, had saved Ned's life at the Battle of the Trident. Howland would follow Ned into hell itself. Lord Willem Dustin, Ethan Glover, the only survivor of Brandon's group that Aerys had arrested, finally freed from the black cells. Martin Castle, Master-at-Arms of Winterfell. Theo Wool, Sir Mark Ricewell, 7 northern warriors, loyal unto death. They rode south through Dorne. The journey took weeks. Following directions from locals who had seen 3 men in white cloaks riding into the Red Mountains months ago, the trail led to the most isolated reaches of the Dornish frontier, where the mountains met the desert, where no one lived because nothing would grow. And there, rising from the barren landscape, stood the Tower of Joy. It was not an impressive structure, simple pale stone, a single tower with a few small buildings around it. The kind of place a minor lord might build as a hunting lodge, then forget about. Nothing about it suggested importance, except for the three men standing outside. White cloaks moving in the hot wind, white armor that had seen hard use, three of the greatest knights in Westeros waiting like they had known this moment would come, like they had been expecting it. Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, nearly 60 years old but still formidable. A lifetime of battles had not slowed him much. Sir Oswell Wended the Black Bat, quick and deadly despite his years, a veteran of more fights than most men could imagine. And Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, dawn strapped across his back, its pale blade visible over his shoulder, the finest swordsman in Westeros. The knight Ned had fought beside in tournaments years ago, before everything went wrong. Ned and his 6 companions stopped their horses a respectful distance away. The two groups studied each other across the dusty ground, everyone understanding what was about to happen, no one eager for it. Ned, dismounted, walked forward until he could speak without shouting. Arthur stepped forward to meet him. Two men who should have been friends, separated now by loyalty and duty and choices neither could undo. The conversation that followed would haunt Ned Stark for the rest of his life. He would dream of it, wake in the night, hearing the words again, the weight of what was said pressing down on him until he could barely breathe. "I looked for you on the Trident," Ned said. His voice carried accusation without anger. "You could have fought beside Rhaegar, changed everything." Gerald Hightower answered for them all. "We were not there." Simple statement of fact. No apology, no explanation. Ned pushed harder. "Woe to the usurper if you had been." Acknowledging what everyone knew, these three could have turned the battle, could have saved Rhaegar, could have prevented Robert from winning. Arthur's response cut deeper. "When King's Landing fell, Sir Jaime slew your king with a golden sword, and I wondered where you were." Throwing Ned's words back, "Where were you when the city burned? When Elia was murdered? When children died?" The accusation hung between them. Both sides had failed someone. Both sides carried guilt they could never wash away. Ned tried one more time. "Far away, or Ares would yet sit the Iron Throne, and our false brother would burn in 7 hells." Defending Jaime's choice, defending the necessity of regicide when the king was mad. Arthur said nothing to that. What could he say? That he understood why Jaime broke his oath, that he had wanted to do the same 1,000 times. That standing beside Ares while innocent men burned had destroyed something inside him. Instead, he simply stated the obvious. The Targaryens are gone. The war is over. Robert has won. Ned shook his head. Not all of them. He knew. Somehow he had figured it out. The baby inside the tower. The last Targaryen. The reason 3 Kingsguard had stayed behind. Gerald Hightower's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. Our knees do not bend easily. They would not abandon their post, would not surrender, would not betray the oath they had sworn to Rhaegar. Arthur drew dawn. The pale blade whispered free of its scabbard. Morning sunlight caught the metal, and it seemed to glow. For a moment, everyone froze. The greatest sword wielded by the greatest swordsman, about to be used in anger for the last time. "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come." Arthur's voice was soft, almost gentle. He bore no hatred toward these northern men. They were doing what they believed right, just as he was doing what he knew he must. Ted drew his own sword. the moment crystallizing into something inevitable, 7 against 3. But these 3 were legends, and everyone on both sides knew that numbers might not be enough. And now it begins, Ned said. The final battle of Robert's Rebellion. The last fight. The moment that would decide whether Rhaegar's son lived or died. Arthur Dayne shook his head slightly. No, now it ends. He raised Dawn. Gerald and Oswell moved to flank him. 3 Kingsguard in perfect formation, prepared to die but determined to make death costly. Ned's 6 companions spread out, surrounding the 3, looking for openings, finding none. These were not ordinary knights. These were the White Swords, the finest warriors their generation had produced. For one more heartbeat, no one moved. The wind blew dust across the scene. The Tower of Joy stood silent behind the Kingsguard. Inside, Lyanna Stark lay dying, her newborn son in her arms, the future of House Targaryen, dependent on 3 men in white cloaks. Then Howland Reed charged, and 7 men rushed 3, and the final page of Arthur Dayne's legend began to be written in blood on Dornish sand. The Sword of the Morning had fought his last tournament, won his last duel. This was not about glory or honor or songs to be sung. This was about keeping a promise to a dead friend, about protecting an innocent child from a world that would kill him. Dawn swept up in a perfect arc. The battle was joined, and the greatest knight in Westeros began to die. Dawn moved first. Arthur spun toward the charging Northmen with the pale blade already in motion. The great sword swept through the air faster than something that size should move. Sir Mark Ricewell barely got his shield up in time. Dawn sheared through the wood and kept going. Ricewell staggered backward, arm numb from impact. Gerold Hightower crashed into Theowool like a battering ram. The White Bull might have been old, but he fought with the strength that had earned his title. His blade found Wool's side, punching through leather and mail. Wool went down screaming. Oswell became a blur of white and black. His sword work was poetry, defensive, efficient, letting opponents commit to attacks, then punishing their overreach. He caught Ethan Glover's blade on his guard and twisted. Glover's weapon went flying. A follow-through slash opened Glover's shoulder to bone. 7 against 3, but the 3 were Kingsguard. And for those first terrible moments, the 7 learned what that meant. Arthur Dayne was everywhere at once. His fighting style defied description. He moved like water, finding its level, like wind changing direction. Impossible to predict, impossible to counter. Dawn cut through regular steel, as if the other blades were made of clay. Lord Willem Dustin tried to flank Arthur while the Sword of the Morning engaged Martin Castle. Dustin raised his sword for a strike at Arthur's exposed back. Arthur somehow knew, spun, without looking. Dawn came around in a horizontal arc that caught Dustin in the chest. The pale blade punched through armor and ribs and heart. Dustin was dead before he hit the ground. 1 of 7 fallen. Martin Castle pressed forward. Winterfell's master-at-arms was skilled, had trained Ned and his brothers, had fought in dozens of battles. He lasted perhaps 10 exchanges with Arthur before Dawn found the gap between his helm and gorget. Castle collapsed without a sound. 2 down. The northern warriors began to realize the terrible mathematics of their situation. Yes, they outnumbered the Kingsguard, but they were dying faster than the White Cloaks. This was not going to be a simple matter of overwhelming through numbers. Gerold Hightower took a spear thrust through his side from Howland Reed. The small Cranachman was quick, hard to see in the chaos, hard to track. The White Bull roared, grabbed the spear shaft, pulled Howland close enough to headbutt him. Howland went down dazed. Gerold turned back to his other opponents, blood streaming from the wound in his side. Sir Mark Ricewell came at Arthur from the left while Ned Stark attacked from the right. Coordination, strategy, trying to divide Arthur's attention. Arthur let his body answer. Dawn swept up to catch Ned's blade, redirected it past Arthur's head. In the same motion, Arthur's boot lashed out, caught Ricewell in the knee. Something crunched. Redswell screamed and fell. Arthur's riposte took Ricewell through the throat as the knight tried to rise. 3 of 7 dead. The King's Guard were not unscathed. Geralt bled from multiple wounds now, still fighting but slower, weaker. Oswald had taken a cut across his sword arm, not deep enough to stop him, but enough to slow his strikes. Arthur alone seemed untouched. Dawn wove patterns in the air. Every attack turned aside, every opening exploited. He fought like the inevitable conclusion to a mathematical proof. Perfect, inexorable. Ethan Glover, one-armed now and desperate, charged at Geralt from behind, got his remaining hand on a dagger, drove it between armor plates into the White Bull's back. Geralt stiffened, turned. His blade found Glover's stomach. They fell together in the dust, both dying, both beyond help. Oswald faced the Awul, who had somehow gotten back to his feet despite the wound in his side. Oswald fought with the desperation of a man who knows death is coming, trying to take his killer with him. Their blades met again and again. Then Wool made a mistake, overextended on a thrust. Oswald's counterstroke took him through the neck. Wool's head came half off. He was gone before his body understood it should fall. 4 Northmen dead, 2 King's Guard down, now 3 against 3. Better odds, but one of the 3 was Arthur Dayne with Dawn in his hands. Ned Stark was tiring. Every parry sent shockwaves up his arms. His sword had notches in it from meeting Dawn. His armor was scored with near misses. Any one of those strikes landing true would have ended him. But Arthur was not trying to kill Ned quickly, was not pressing with the overwhelming force he could have brought to bear. Some part of him, even now, did not want this, did not want to kill these men who were only doing what they believed right. Howland Reed recovered from Geralt's headbutt, rose unsteadily, saw Oswald turning toward him. The small Cranagman was not a warrior in the traditional sense. His people fought differently. Nets and poison and traps, not open battle with swords. But Howland had something the Kingsguard did not expect: desperation, cunning, and the willingness to win ugly. He threw a net, an actual net, the kind used for fishing. Oswald saw it coming, tried to dodge. The weighted edges caught his legs. He stumbled. Howland rushed in with a spear, drove it up through Oswald's armpit, where the armor was weakest. The black bat fell. Only Arthur remained. 1 Kingsguard against 3 Northmen, but 2 of those Northmen were wounded and exhausted. Only Ned was still relatively fresh, and fresh meant nothing against the sword of the morning. Arthur came at Ned like a storm. Dawn moving in patterns that seemed to leave no openings, high strike flowing into low, thrust becoming slash. Ned's world narrowed to the pale blade trying to kill him. Nothing else existed, just Dawn and the desperate need to keep it away from his body. He could not. No one could. Arthur was too fast, too skilled, too perfect. Dawn slipped past Ned's guard. The flat of the blade slammed into his chest, sent him sprawling. His sword flew from his hands, landed in the dust 3 yards away. Arthur stood over him, raised Dawn for the killing blow. Ned looked up into the face of the man who had become his friend in another life, saw sadness there, and determination, and the knowledge that this was necessary. The blade started down. Howland Reed hit Arthur from behind. How exactly became a matter of debate that would never be settled. The show would later depict Howland stabbing Arthur in the neck. The books suggested something else. a crânogman trick, a net or poison dart, or some underhanded tactic that gave Ned the opening he needed. However it happened, Arthur stumbled. Dawn's perfect arc interrupted. The blade that never missed. Ned grabbed his fallen sword, rolled, came up swinging. His blade caught Arthur across the back. Not a deep cut, not immediately fatal, but enough to stagger the sword of the morning. Arthur turned, tried to bring Dawn around. Ned was faster, desperation lending speed. His sword found the gap in Arthur's armor at the side, slid between ribs. Arthur gasped, looked down at the blade in his body, then up at Ned. No anger in his eyes, no hatred, just a terrible sadness, and perhaps relief that it was finally over. He fell to his knees. Dawn slipped from his fingers. The pale blade that had never failed him lay in the dust beside its master. Ned caught Arthur as he collapsed, lowered him gently to the ground. Arthur's blood soaked into Dornish sand, the greatest knight in Westeros dying far from home, far from glory. For a secret most would never understand. Arthur's lips moved. Ned leaned close to hear. The words were soft, meant only for the man who had killed him. Protect him, protect him. Promise me, the baby. Promise me, you will keep him safe. Then Arthur Dayne, the sword of the morning, finest knight of his age, died in the arms of his enemy, died keeping an oath to a dead prince, died so a hidden child might live. The battle was over. Of the 7 Northmen who rode to the Tower of Joy, only 2 remained standing, Ned Stark and Howland Reed. 5 good men dead, 3 legendary knights dead, 8 lives spent for one crying baby inside a tower. Ned picked up Dawn. The pale blade felt wrong in his hands. Too light, too perfect. This was not his sword, would never be his sword. He would return it to Starfall, give it back to House Dayne, with his apologies and his respect. But first he had to climb the stairs of the Tower of Joy, had to find his sister, had to hear her final words and make a promise that would define the rest of his life. The war was over. The battle was done, but the consequences were only beginning. The stairs inside the Tower of Joy seemed endless. Each step echoed in the silence. Ned climbed with Dawn in his hands and blood on his clothes. Howland Reed followed, limping from his injuries, both men dreading what they would find at the top. The door opened onto a simple room, a bed, a window letting in hot Dornish sunlight, and Lyanna Stark lying in sheets soaked red with blood. "Ned," she whispered. Her voice was paper thin. Barely there, his little sister, who had been so fierce and wild, reduced to this pale dying thing. He rushed to her side, dropped to his knees beside the bed. Lyanna's hand found his, cold despite the heat. She was leaving, had been leaving for hours, had stayed alive through will alone, waiting for someone to arrive. In her other arm, she held a baby, tiny, red-faced, crying with the confusion of the newly born. A boy with dark hair and eyes that would someday turn gray, stark coloring, but his blood carried dragons too. "Promise me," Lyanna said. The words cost her everything to speak. "Promise me, Nedda." He understood immediately. This baby was Rhaegar's son, the last Targaryen. Robert would kill him, would hunt him down and murder him as he had wanted to murder all of Rhaegar's children. As the Mountain had murdered Aegon and Rhaenys, Robert's hatred for Rhaegar extended to anyone who carried Targaryen blood. But this was Ned's nephew, his sister's son, blood of his blood, no matter who the father was. "I promise," he said, his voice breaking. "I swear it. I will protect him." Lyanna smiled, a terrible smile, relieved and heartbroken at once. His name she managed. His name is Aegon. Make sure he knows. Make sure someday he understands who he really is. Then she closed her eyes. Her breathing, already shallow, simply stopped. The fierce she-wolf of Winterfell, who had caused wars with her choices, died in a pool of blood, giving life to a child who would grow up never knowing his true name. Ned held her while she went cold, held his sister and her son, and wept. 5 friends dead outside, 3 knights dead, Lyanna dead, all of it for love or prophecy or madness, all of it preventable if people had just been honest with each other. But the realm did not work that way. Secrets piled on secrets, lies built on lies, and good people died caught between them. Howland took the baby gently from Lyanna's arms. The child had stopped crying, looked up at the Crannogman with dark, ancient eyes, as if already understanding the weight his existence would place on others. "We have to take him north," Howland said. "Raise him as yours, a bastard son from the war. Everyone will believe it." Ned's honor recoiled at the idea. Let the world think he had broken his marriage vows. Let Catelyn, his new wife, believe he had been unfaithful, spend the rest of his life carrying the stain of adultery. But the alternative was watching his nephew die, watching Robert's executioner take this innocent baby and dash his head against a wall. The choice was no choice at all. They buried Lyanna beneath the tower. No time for proper ceremony. No sept, no septon. Just 2 exhausted men digging in hard ground until they had a grave deep enough. They laid her to rest with the summer roses Rhaegar had crowned her with so long ago. Then they built 8 cairns, piles of stones for each of the dead. 5 northern men who had followed Ned into darkness. 3 Kingsguard who had kept their oaths unto death. The monuments were simple, rough, but they marked where brave men fell. Ned placed Dorne carefully beside Arthur's cairn. The pale blade gleamed in the fading light. He would return it to Starfall, but first he wanted Arthur to rest one more night beside the sword that had defined him. The journey back to civilization took weeks. Ned, Howland, and baby Jon. That was the name Ned chose. Jon, after Jon Arryn Snow, because he was claiming him as a bastard born of a northern mother whose name he would never reveal. The lie was born, the secret that would poison Ned's marriage and define Jon's entire life. But it kept the boy alive. That was what mattered. Ned had made a promise. He would keep it no matter the cost. They stopped at Starfall on their way north. The ancestral seat of House Dayne rose from the coast like a pale memory. Ned carried Dorne to the gates, asked to speak with the lord of the house. Arthur's older brother received them. The man's face went still when he saw the pale blade in Ned's hands. He knew immediately what it meant. His brother was dead. The sword of the morning had fallen. Ned returned Dorne with the respect it deserved, spoke of Arthur's skill and honor, how he was the finest knight Ned had ever faced, how he had died bravely defending what he believed in. Ned did not mention the baby, did not explain what the Kingsguard had been protecting. Some secrets were too dangerous to share. House Dayne received the sword without bitterness. Arthur had died, keeping his oath. There was honor in that. The sword would rest in Starfall until another Dayne proved worthy to wield it. Ashara Dayne was there, Arthur's sister, the beauty that had turned heads at Harrenhal. She looked at Ned with eyes full of questions. Her brother was dead. Her house had lost its greatest knight, and this northern lord stood in their hall, carrying the sword that had killed so many. What passed between Ned and Ashara, no one recorded. Some conversations happen in the spaces between words, in looks exchanged, in things understood but never spoken. Within days of Ned's departure, Ashara climbed to the top of the Palstone sword tower, the highest point of Starfall. She looked out over the summer sea, then stepped off into empty air. They never found her body. The waves took it. House Dayne had lost Arthur and Ashara in the span of weeks. 2 lights extinguished. The family devastated by a war that had consumed the realm. Ned continued north with Jon, arrived at Winterfell to find Catelyn waiting with their infant son Robb. She looked at the baby in Ned's arms, the bastard son her husband claimed. Her face went cold, distant. A wall went up between them that would never fully come down. Ned could not explain, could not tell her the truth. The secret was too important, too dangerous. Robert visited Winterfell shortly after, saw baby Jon, made a joke about Ned's unfaithfulness, laughed about his friend finally acting like a real man. Ned said nothing, took the insult, let everyone believe the lie, because the lie kept Jon alive, and keeping Jon alive honored the promise to Lyanna, honored Arthur's sacrifice, honored everything those 8 cairns in Dorne represented. The realm moved on. Robert's reign began. The Targaryens were gone. Peace returned. But Ned Stark carried the weight of the Tower of Joy for the rest of his days. Carried it until an executioner's blade took his head in King's Landing years later. Carried the secret that would reshape Westeros when it finally came to light. Arthur Dayne had died to protect that secret. Died believing he had failed because Ned reached the tower. But in truth, Arthur had succeeded, had bought enough time for Lyanna to secure Ned's promise. The Sword of the Morning's last stand had meaning, had purpose. His death was not in vain, even if he never knew it, even if he died thinking he had broken his oath to Rhaegar. Jon Snow would grow, would join the Night's Watch, would become Lord Commander, would fight the dead and save the realm. Everything Rhaegar had believed in, everything Arthur had died for, would come to pass. But that was the future. In the present, there were only 8 piles of stones in the Dornish mountains, a pale sword resting in Starfall, a secret carried north, and a legend beginning its long transformation from man to myth. The songs began almost immediately. Bards in taverns from dawn to the wall sang of the Tower of Joy, of 3 knights against 7, of the greatest duel in living memory, of honor and duty and the price of keeping oaths. Most of the songs got it wrong, made it more glorious than it was, turned brutal necessity into noble sacrifice, added details that never happened, removed complications that made the story messy. But the core remained true. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, died keeping his word. That part, at least, no song could exaggerate. It was already as heroic as reality gets. Sir Barristan Selmy was the highest-ranking Kingsguard to survive Robert's rebellion. Robert pardoned him, kept him in the White Cloak despite Barristan having fought for the Targaryens. The new king recognized quality when he saw it, and besides, someone needed to teach the younger Kingsguard what the White Cloak actually meant. Barristan carried the memory of his fallen brothers, spoke of them to anyone who would listen, made sure their sacrifice was not forgotten. But when people asked about Arthur Dayne, Barristan's voice would change, become softer, more reverent. Arthur Dayne was the finest knight I ever saw. The words became famous, repeated across the realm. Coming from Barristan the Bold, they carried weight. This was not empty praise. This was truth from a man who knew. Years later, when Barristan served Daenerys Targaryen across the Narrow Sea, he spoke of Arthur to the young queen, told her how Arthur had been Prince Rhaegar's closest friend, how Rhaegar trusted Arthur above all others, how Arthur would have followed Rhaegar into hell itself if his prince commanded it. Daenerys listened, understood that her oldest brother, the brother she never met, had inspired loyalty in the greatest knight of the age. That meant something, said something about Rhaegar that Robert's propaganda could not erase. Jaime Lannister's relationship with Arthur's memory was more complicated. Jaime had become the Kingslayer, the knight who broke the most sacred oath, who murdered the king he swore to protect. Every time someone sneered the title, Jaime thought of Arthur, of the man who had knighted him, the perfect knight who never broke his word. That boy had wanted to be Sir Arthur Dayne. Jaime would think to himself in dark moments, but someplace along the way, he had become the smiling knight instead, the villain, the oathbreaker, everything Arthur would have despised. Except, it was not that simple. Jaime had killed Aerys to save King's Landing. The Mad King had commanded his pyromancers to burn the entire city, to kill everyone, rather than let Robert take the throne. Jaime killed him to prevent that, broke his oath to save 500,000 lives. Would Arthur have done the same? Jaime tortured himself with the question, the perfect knight faced with an impossible choice. Would Arthur have let the city burn while keeping his oath, or would he have drawn dawn and ended the Mad King before the wildfire could ignite? Jaime would never know. Arthur died before facing that particular test. Died keeping an oath that seemed clear-cut. Protect the tower. Protect what is inside. Die if necessary. But Jaime's oath had become muddier. Protect the king or protect the people. Both were sacred. Both mattered. Choose one and betray the other. Arthur never had to navigate that particular hell. Still, Jaime measured himself against Arthur's memory and found himself wanting. When he became Lord Commander of the Kingsguard himself, he would look at the younger knights under his command and despair. These were not the caliber of men who had served with Arthur. These were political appointments, second sons of powerful lords, men who wore the white cloak for prestige, not for the oath. I learned from Sir Arthur Dayne, who could have slain all 5 of you with his left hand while taking a piss with the right. Jaime told them once in disgust. The statement was crude, probably exaggerated, but the sentiment was true. Arthur existed on a level these newer knights could not comprehend. In Dawn, House Dayne became synonymous with tragedy. Arthur and Ashara, both gone within weeks. The family shattered by Robert's rebellion. Dawn sat in Starfall's great hall, waiting. Years passed. No one proved worthy. Edric Dayne grew up in Arthur's shadow. His nephew, born after Arthur died, carrying the weight of a legend he never met. People expected greatness from him, expected the next sword of the morning, expected Arthur reborn. But Edric was just a boy, just a young lord trying to hold his house together. He was skilled with a blade, yes, but skilled enough to wield Dawn. That remained uncertain. The sword waited, patient as always. It would find its wielder when the time was right. Interestingly, Edric was named after Eddard Stark, a gesture of respect from House Dayne to the man who had killed their greatest knight, because Ned had returned Dawn, had spoken of Arthur with honor, had buried the dead with dignity. That meant something to the Danes, showed character that transcended war and sides. In the north, only Ned and Howland Reed knew the full truth of the Tower of Joy. Ned never spoke of it. When people asked how he defeated Arthur Dayne, he was honest. He would have killed me. But for Howland Reed, giving credit where it was due, never claiming he beat the Sword of the Morning in fair combat, because he had not, and Ned's honor would not let him pretend otherwise. Howland Reed returned to Greywater Watch, disappeared into the swamps of the Neck, never left his lands again, never spoke of what happened at the Tower of Joy. The Crannogman who saved Ned Stark's life became a ghost, a legend himself, the only other person who knew the secret. Jon Snow grew up at Winterfell, never knowing the truth. never understanding why his father was so distant, why his stepmother hated him, why he was kept separate from the other Stark children, despite being raised alongside them. He thought he was a bastard, a stain on Ned Stark's honor, a reminder of some woman his father had loved during the war. The truth was so much stranger, so much more important. He was the prince Rhaegar died, believing in, the child Arthur gave his life to protect. The last dragon, hidden in the north, growing up thinking he was no one. Dawn waited in Starfall. Jon grew in Winterfell. Nad carried his secret. Barristan spoke his memories. Jaime measured himself against a ghost. And across Westeros, in taverns and castles, people told stories of Arthur Dayne. The stories grew with time, became exaggerated, became legend. The man transformed into myth. But the core remained, the finest knight who ever lived, the warrior who never lost with dawn in his hands, the Kingsguard who kept his oath even when keeping it meant death. Some legends are true. Arthur Dayne was one of them. Not because he never lost, not because he was invincible, but because when tested, when offered the chance to walk away and live, he chose duty over life. That is what made him great. Not the sword, not the skill, the choice. The same choice the best Kingsguard always made. The choice that defined what the white cloak truly meant. Arthur Dayne made that choice at the Tower of Joy, and in making it, secured his place in history, not as a warrior, not as a swordsman, but as the answer to the question every knight must eventually face. What matters more, your life or your word? Arthur chose his word, and the realm remembered him for it. What does it mean to be a knight? The question has haunted Westeros since the first man swore an oath and picked up a sword. Arthur Dayne answered that question with his life, with his choices, with the way he died. He served a mad king because he had sworn to serve the king. Not the good king, not the just king. The king, the oath, did not have exceptions, did not include escape clauses for when things became difficult. You swore, you served, you died if necessary. That absolutism seems almost naive from a distance. Surely there must be room for judgment, for recognizing when an oath becomes complicit in evil, for understanding that sometimes breaking your word is the moral choice. Jaime Lannister broke his oath, killed the king to save the city. History called him Kingslayer, reviled him, marked him as dishonorable, but he saved 500,000 lives. Was he wrong? Was Arthur's blind loyalty to Aerys more honorable than Jaime's choice to act? These are not simple questions. They do not have clean answers. Arthur died without facing them. His oath to Rhaegar was clear: protect the tower, protect the child. There was no moral ambiguity in that command. No children would burn if Arthur kept his word. But if Arthur had lived long enough to stand beside Aerys when the Mad King ordered King's Landing destroyed, if he had been there instead of Jaime, would the perfect night have drawn dawn and ended the madness? Or would he have stood silent while wildfire consumed innocents? We cannot know. Arthur's death spared him that impossible test. Let him die believing he had honored his oath. Let him pass into legend as the knight who never compromised, never broke faith, never wavered. Perhaps that is the real tragedy. Not that Arthur died, but that he died before the world could truly test whether his honor was wisdom or just beautiful stubbornness. The realm needed men like Arthur Dayne, still needs them. People who believe in something larger than themselves, who value their word more than their life, who stand when standing requires everything. But the realm also needed men like Jaime Lannister, people willing to break the rules when the rules become monstrous, who understand that honor without mercy can become its own kind of cruelty. Both men were necessary. Both men were flawed. Both men tried to do what they thought right in a world that punished righteousness and rewarded pragmatism. Arthur's legacy is complicated because he was complicated. He was not the perfect knight of songs. He was a man trying to navigate impossible choices with insufficient options. He did the best he could with what he understood. That is all any of us can do. The 8 cairns at the Tower of Joy mark more than deaths. They mark the price of certainty, of believing so completely in your cause that you will die for it. 5 Northmen believed they were rescuing a kidnapped girl. 3 Kingsguard believed they were protecting a prince. All of them were right. All of them were wrong. All of them died because compromise was impossible. Wars are fought by people who cannot see the other side's humanity, who cannot imagine that their enemies might also be honorable, brave, trying their best in terrible circumstances. Arthur and Ned were friends once, might have been friends again in a different world. But the world they lived in demanded they kill each other. So they did, and the one who survived carried guilt for the rest of his days, not because he was wrong, but because being right required killing someone worthy of respect. This is what Arthur Dayne's story teaches us, that honor is more complicated than songs suggest, that oaths can trap you, that the greatest knights often die for causes that history will judge ambiguous at best. But it also teaches us something else, something more hopeful, that even in a world of compromise and pragmatism and moral relativism, some people still keep their word, still value duty over life, still believe that what you swore to do matters more than whether it benefits you. Arthur Dayne was not perfect. His loyalty to Arius enabled atrocity. His devotion to Rhaegar's prophecy cost lives. His unwillingness to bend led to his death and the deaths of good men. But he kept his word in an age of broken promises and discarded oaths, in a time when lords switched sides for profit and knights served whoever paid most. Arthur Dayne stood for something, for the idea that your word is your bond, that once given, an oath becomes who you are. Dawn rests in Starfall. The sword waits for another worthy hand, but worthiness means different things to different people. To House Dayne, it means skill and honor. To Arthur, it meant never breaking faith. To others, it might mean wisdom to know when oaths must be set aside for greater good. Perhaps the next sword of the morning will be wiser than Arthur, will understand that honor and pragmatism need not be enemies, will find the balance between keeping your word and recognizing when circumstances demand flexibility. Or perhaps they will be exactly like Arthur, unbending, absolute, a knight who makes no compromises and pays the price gladly. Either way, they will carry Arthur's legacy. The weight of a legend who proved that in a world of broken promises, some people still die keeping theirs. Whether that makes them heroes or fools depends on who is telling the story. And in Westeros, everyone has a story to tell. In Starfall, the dawn breaks over the summer sea. Light touches the pale stone walls, catches the waves below, spreads across the island where House Dayne has stood for thousands of years. Inside the great hall, dawn rests in its place of honor. The pale blade gleams in the morning light, unchanged by time, waiting as it has waited before, patient as stone, certain that eventually another hand will prove worthy to wield it. The sword does not mourn, cannot mourn. It is metal and starlight and purpose. But if it could remember, it would recall the man who carried it last, the way Arthur moved, the precision of his strikes, the honor in every action. Dawn has had many wielders over the millennia, will have many more, but Arthur Dayne remains special even in that long lineage, the one who died keeping his oath, the one who used the fallen star's blade to protect a secret that changed the world. The Tower of Joy still stands in the Red Mountains, empty now, silent. The 8 cairns have eroded, wind and weather, doing what they always do. Returning stone to dust, giving the dead back to dawn. But the tower remembers, in the way places remember significant events. The walls absorbed the blood and tears, and desperate hope held them, transformed them into something intangible but real, memory made solid. Travelers who pass that way sometimes stop, look at the ruins, wonder what happened there. The locals tell stories, most are wrong, some are close. None capture the full truth, because truth is always more complicated than stories allow. A woman died there, giving birth. 3 knights died defending her. 5 warriors died trying to reach her, and a baby who should have died, instead lived, grew, became important in ways those 8 dead people could never have predicted. That is how history works. Small moments, individual choices, people doing what they think is right, and decades later, the consequences ripple outward in patterns too complex to trace. Arthur Dayne chose duty. That choice saved Jon Snow. Jon Snow joined the Night's Watch, became Lord Commander, led the fight against the White Walkers. Everything connected, everything mattered. The sword of the morning's last stand bought time for the prince who was promised to survive infancy. Rhaegar was right. Arthur's faith in his prince was justified. The prophecy had meaning, but none of them lived long enough to see it fulfilled. That is the tragedy and the beauty of it. They believed without proof, acted without certainty, died without knowing they had succeeded. Faith requires not knowing. Hope demands uncertainty. Arthur had both, had them completely. And that unwavering belief, even when all evidence suggested futility, made him more than just a great warrior, made him someone worth remembering. The realm has moved on. Robert Baratheon's reign ended. The Lannisters rose and fell. The Starks nearly went extinct before clawing back to prominence. The wheel of power turned and turned and turned. Houses rose, houses fell. The Game of Thrones consumed players by the dozen. Through it all, the songs about Arthur Dayne persisted. New generations learned his name, heard about the Sword of the Morning, aspired to his standard, even while understanding they would fall short. That persistence matters. In a world where everything changes, where nothing lasts, where power is temporary and glory fades, some stories endure. Not because they are simple, not because they are comfortable, but because they are true in ways that transcend facts. Arthur Dayne embodies something Westeros desperately wants to believe still exists. Honor that cannot be bought, loyalty that does not waver, skill that borders on supernatural, a knight who actually lived up to the ideals rather than just pretending. The reality was messier. Arthur served a mad king, enabled Rhaegar's dangerous obsession, died for a prophecy that most would consider insane. His perfection came with costs. His honor enabled horror. But in the songs, those complications fade. What remains is the essential truth. A man kept his word. A warrior fought to his last breath. A knight protected the innocent, even when it meant dying forgotten in a remote tower. Dawn waits in Starfall. The tower stands in dawn. The legend lives in songs, and somewhere in all of that, the real Arthur Dayne rests. Not the myth, not the simplified story. The complicated man who tried his best in a world that gave him impossible choices. Perhaps someday another Dayne will lift that pale blade, will become the new Sword of the Morning, will face their own impossible choices, will wonder what Arthur would do. And the answer, if Arthur could give it, would be simple. Keep your word, do your duty. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, And when the time comes to choose between your life and your honor, choose honor. Not because it guarantees success, not because it makes you invincible, but because some things matter more than survival. Some oaths are worth dying to keep. Some causes demand everything. Arthur Dayne understood that, lived it, died proving it. The sun rises over Starfall. Light touches dawn's blade. Another morning, another day. The sword waits. The legend endures. And in the quiet moments before the world wakes, you can almost see him. The sword of the morning, standing vigil one more time. Forever young, forever dutiful. Forever keeping the oath that defined him. Now it ends. Now it begins. The story continues, as all great stories do, waiting for the next worthy soul to pick up the tale and carry it forward into whatever dawn comes next. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this journey into Arthur Dayne's life, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the legends of Westeros. Until next time, may your own oaths be kept and your honor remain unbroken.